Good afternoon and welcome to all of you here. I'm Lyons, Dean here at Berkeley-Haas, and this is, as you know, our Dean Speakers Series. This is our highest level series, and this is the final one for the fall semester. We have a terrific roster of people who will be coming in the spring, so keep an eye out. This is our program really for getting firsthand perspective on what a lot of leaders are doing in lots of different areas and industries, and today is no exception. It is my honor today to introduce to you Diane Bryant. Really a remarkable career, and we'll give her a big hand in just a moment. We're going to dive into a set of questions. We're going to do this one as an interview format, and but we want to make sure that you've got your own questions, and as usual, we've got microphones and so forth where you'll have access to Diane and her perspective near the end there. Diane was the first in her family to attend college. Her career was described in a 2015 Business Insider article as, quote, one of the most improbable success stories in tech. After attending a local community college, she transferred to UC Davis and went on to earn her degree in electrical engineering. That was 1985. That same year, she took her first job at Intel. In her more than 3 decades at the company, her career has spanned the arrival of many things, from the home-based personal computer to the ubiquity of today's smartphones. She's risen in the ranks to serve as Intel's corporate vice president and chief information officer. Most recently, she served as group president of the Data Center Group, worldwide organization that develops the data center platforms and digital services economy, generating $17 billion in revenue in 2016. Just to calibrate, because I know this is a numeraire you think about, that's about 100 times the size of the Haas School, just to put it in local perspective. Still serving as group president. She is currently on leave, and her new role will be announced in January of 2018. She's acclaimed as one of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley. She was named among Fortune's 50 most powerful women in business in 2015, also 2016, and Business Insider ranked her number 32 in the list of Silicon Valley 100 last year. In the true spirit of Beyond Yourself, our defining principle Beyond Yourself, she's contributed more than just to Intel's bottom line. She's also known for her tireless advocacy of women and underrepresented people. She served as the executive sponsor of the Network for Intel African American Employees and on the technical board of the Anita Borg Institute, a nonprofit organization focused on the advancement of women in computing. In 2017, UC Davis honored Diane with the Outstanding Alumnus of the Year. We're so pleased to have her here today. Please join me in a warm welcome for Diane. Thank you.
That was a very nice introduction. Could you come with me everywhere I go?
I can. I would love to do that. I would, and I know I will learn something every time.
That was very nice.
We had a little bit of a pre-meeting with a number of students, and I learned quite a bit even at that pre-meeting. So thank you for that as well. Maybe we'll start early on in your experience, sort of your educational background. You know, as we think about how you got a start, what your parents expected of you, kind of what drove you, anything you'd like to give us on those early stages?
Well, so the Business Insider comment was true. It was kind of an unlikely path. My father's actually a convicted felon. He actually served time right out here in San Quentin. And so we used to talk about, I had a room with a view. So you have a lovely view. He also had a room with a view. It was a very violent environment. And my dad said, when you're 18, you're out on your own. That's it. I'm not responsible for you, legally not responsible for you anymore. So at 18, I graduated in February, came home. All my stuff was on the driveway, packed it up. And I still had 4 months of high school left. So I was homeless the last 4 months of high school. So then I got through high school, didn't have any money, so I went to community college, which I went to community college. And I was sitting in community college, and the guy sitting next to me said, hey, you know, what's your major? And I said I didn't have a major declared. And he said, well, if you're in calculus too, you know, you should be an engineer. It's the highest starting salary with just a bachelor's degree. And I was like, holy cow, I'm going to be an engineer. I don't know what an engineer is, but that is what I'm going to be. So I declared my major in engineering, transferred to UC Davis and got a degree, and then joined Intel straight out of school.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, very
few
of our interviews start in this interesting a way. I mean, this is outstanding.
Well, it wasn't at the time, but yeah.
No.
I'm
No,
kidding.
and
that's why it was. I say I'm an accidental engineer. I'm a very, very fortunate person to have found my way into engineering and found my way into tech.
Yeah.
Given where tech is today,
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate.
And how about your your leadership style? Because I can only help. I have to believe it's had an impact. This background.
Yeah. So absolutely. So my background certainly led to what now is getting a lot of buzz of grit. Like I have a lot of grit. And the definition of grit being the power of passion and perseverance to drive down towards that ultimate goal, and not give up. And when you fail, you get back up. Failure is no option. And given my childhood and given my background, that was my mentality. I am going to succeed. Failure is no option. What's the alternative? And so you bring who you are to work every day. And so when I come in to the tech world, where everything is an experiment. I mean, nothing is guaranteed to work. Like, who knows what's going to get invented next? Who knows if it's going to fall on its face or actually lead to market success? But that mentality of there is a path, there is a way. We learn from the prior mistake, and you keep going, and that invention cycle keeps going until you're successful. I certainly bring that to work. Believe in the organization, believe in the power of the collective wisdom, believe that we can lead the company to success.
Well, and that high school counselor obviously had a big impact on you. Were there other people early on that you'd say there was another person that kind of let me see a me that I wasn't seeing?
It's an interesting question, because if I look back, I can identify someone at every point in my career that believed in me and helped me make that next step. At the time, you don't see it, but then you look back and you see it. And it's funny because we call them advocates. Like, who's advocating for your career? And I always have employees say, so how do I find my advocate? And that's a hard question, because by definition, my definition, an advocate is someone that knows you well, understands your strengths and also the opportunities for continuous improvement, and is standing at a purview in the company where they have visibility into opportunities that you, at your level, would not naturally see. And so it's very hard to walk up to someone and say, will you be my advocate? It's like saying, will you be my friend? It's like, I don't know. Do I like you? I don't know. So your advocates really do end up seeking you out, which is why I think when you're in the moment, you don't realize they're your advocate. And when you look back, they are. So all along my career, there's always been someone that I think about that believed in me, believed in my capabilities, and was interested, as all good leaders and managers are, of putting the talent into the position that can have the greatest impact for the company. So I would also say that an advocate is not advocating you just because they like you and want to see you successful. They're advocating for you because they want to be successful. A good leader is finding the right talent for the job. So they're obviously looking for their success and for the success of the company. So I think it is a critical role for all to have an advocate.
And sometimes we use the term sponsor. Do you think of those words similarly?
No, those are the same words. So an advocate is your sponsor. They're advocating for you, or they're sponsoring you. Those words are the same. The words that I differentiate from are coach and mentor. Coach and mentors over here, advocate and sponsors over here. And most corporations have mentoring programs. Intel obviously has one as well. I've been mentored and mentee for zillions of times. My opinion is those folks have a very limited impact on your true career progression, because by definition it's someone that's not in your direct line, someone that you can have that confidential conversation with of, hey, here's my situation, what do you think? Like, if you're thinking about quitting your job, you wouldn't go into your management chain and say, hey, I'm thinking about leaving, what do you think, right? It wouldn't work out very well.
No.
So you need to have that mentor or coach to test confidential ideas off of. But by definition, they're not going to really have the ability to impact and drive your career like an advocate or a sponsor.
I love that distinction. One of my direct reports, who moved on to a wonderful job on campus, I went through one of the leadership acceleration programs here at Berkeley, and I remember she came back to my office. I'd always thought of myself as a mentor. Any good manager would be or wants to be. But she said, and one of the exercises we went through in the leadership development program is that we need to be very intentional for ourselves about who our mentors are and who our, she used the word, sponsors are. And then she said, and I included you on my list of sponsors. Are you comfortable with that? But she had the conversation with me quite directly. And that was the first time I'd really heard a sharp distinction between the two words. I mean, many people understood this long before I did. And I was very happy to play that role. But her initiating that conversation with me changed my mindset and was very useful. And I would imagine you had some of the, whether you used that word or not, you probably...
No, but I think that's very insightful of you, because the word advocate and sponsor for us at Intel didn't come up until around 2006. Intel sponsored a Harvard Business School study along with a couple other large corporations, and they actually, so it's 2006-ish, they actually made that distinction, and it was a conversation around why is it after all these years women are still progress at a lower rates, women still have a lower level of satisfaction with their job. And the review came out and said because women are mentored and men are sponsored. And they said on average a woman will have 23 mentors in their career. Lord. Where a man will have an advocate, someone that is actively working to advance and promote your career. And so we didn't really have that distinction either, so it's a good insight.
So I'm not so late to the
no,
party,
you're not
right?
late at all. You're not slow at all. Yeah.
Okay. When you think about sort of the big lessons in your career, now kind of shifting more toward the full career than the earlier years, are there certain big lessons that you feel like, oh, that one was just a very big one for me? Yeah.
Yeah. One of Intel's values is risk-taking, and I don't think I realized how important that is. It's one of the values. It's on the back of the badge. It's one of 6. But from a career perspective, your willingness to take risks, I think, has been incredibly important. And when I look back on those significant advancements I had in my career, all of them were risky. It's like, wow, why am I doing this? How did I get signed up for this?
Because maybe you didn't have quite the right background coming in, and
or yes, I've gotten the phone call a couple times of go fix. It's like, why do I have to go fix it? Why can't someone? It sounds risky if it's on its way down. Like I'd rather be sailing something up than going into something that's going down. But it's those opportunities that have really had a positive impact on my career. And there was some study done about if people that are successful and people that aren't as successful, are there people that are just lucky and then other people that are just unlucky, right? Is that what differentiates success and failure? And it concludes that it's not that some people are lucky and other people are unlucky. It's the people that are successful create their own luck. Mm-hmm. Luck is something you create, and you create it by being open to new ideas, open to new adventures, willing to take that risk when it may not be an obvious positive path. And so it was interesting in reading that and reflecting on it. It's like, you're right, when you're given an opportunity, do you say, oh my gosh, that's high risk, and no thanks, I'll just stay here. And I've had many employees that you give them what you think is a great opportunity, and you expect them to jump on it, and they go, yeah, never mind, no, I'm not doing that, you know. And so that's an opportunity you've lost, or you be open, you take that offer and move with it and make the most of it.
Love it. Yeah. So I mean, risk is by its nature two-sided. So if I may ask, I mean, an example of one that didn't go as well, if we want to call it a failure, or whatever the right word, and sort of what you took from that when you did something that failed or took on something that didn't work as well.
So I really don't want to sound arrogant here, but when you say something that failed, I go back to the grit.
Okay.
If I had big failures at Intel, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah. And so it's like, it may not be going well, but you figure out how to make the most of it.
Got it.
And you have that, I have that mentality of we're not going to fail. We're going to take what we got and we're going to make the best out of it. We're going to get to the best outcome possible. And that can sound, arrogant, but big failures are not tolerated for very long in corporations. I can definitely look back at projects or opportunities that didn't have the most optimal outcome, for sure. Several of those, but you always find a way to navigate through and get to some
Yeah.
some relative positive conclusion.
And bringing that grit factor, which
Bringing
sounds
that
like
grit
was
factor
foundational for you
in.
throughout your career. Huh?
Yeah, I definitely absolutely believe in grit. So
Yeah.
if you haven't watched the TED Talk of Angelique Duckworth, it's a great TED Talk. But the other thing that back to when you said what are the attributes that I learned, so risk taking is one. The other big one is confidence, and again, there's been lots of studies that say that confidence is a higher indicator of success than competence. And so we talk about the Peter Principle of you rise to your level of incompetency. There's also you rise to your level of self-doubt, right? And then you hit your head and you think, okay, this is it, I just can't do it anymore. And so confidence, especially as a leader, is incredibly important. And as a woman in a minority in the tech community, you often hear other women say, "Oh, he's so confident, he's so arrogant." And most of my friends are men because I was in engineering for 32 years, and then college, before that, and I know that those men are not any more confident than the women are. And they're as worried about taking on that next big challenge and being successful at it as anyone. But what men are much better at is projecting confidence, right? So at all times, project confidence. Even if inside you've got your doubts, everyone does, project confidence, because no one wants to work as part of a team or work for a leader that thinks they're going to fail. Like, can you imagine if your boss comes in and says, "Yeah, today's the day we're all going to fail. It's just going to be a disaster." Like who would want to work for that person, right? And so your job is to convey confidence, and with that confidence, back to grit, right? You will find a solution. You will succeed.
Yeah.
So the other thing I learned is, don't walk around telling people about your deficiencies and how you're likely to fail, and it's all messed up and everything's going to fall apart. It doesn't help.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't help.
No. You mentioned the tech industry. Maybe we'll turn to that now. And if you thought about closing the gender gap, however you see that concept, or also the point that you just made, this, for example, is there a learning and development program, not that that's the be-all and end-all solution, around what you just said, making sure that all people have the confidence to succeed, but maybe it's an even more valuable program for women than men.
Yeah, it is. It's a tool set, right?
Yeah.
How do you succeed in so both is, if you're the minority, what is your tool set to make sure you can succeed within that majority population? Because if you're a minority and you haven't figured out how to work effectively, where effective is consistent with the majority population's means of operating, if you haven't figured that out, you're going to be on the outside of the circle. It's very hard to be in the game and be successful if you're on the bench. So one is, what is that tool set to integrate in and be part of that established majority mode of operation? And then the other is, what's the tool set for the majority population to create an inclusive environment to invite you in, right? So I agree with you. There's a tool set, an educational process on both sides. And diversity is a reality. It's a fact. Inclusion is a decision. And you as a leader, as a manager, as a corporation, as an industry, you decide whether you want to include others into your environment. And for me, that's a big distinction, having been in Intel for 32 years, is if the person that's in a decision-making authoritative position doesn't truly embrace inclusion, it's not going to happen. And it's a mindset, right? And so you change the mindset, the actions will follow. So saying, you work for me, and I say, you need to hire minorities, you need to create an inclusive environment. If you don't truly believe in that, right? If your mindset is not consistent with that, you may do it out of passive aggressive, sure, I'll hire, but then you won't create the inclusive environment that allows those people to thrive. So it is a mindset change. I think there's a lot we can do with education for certain. How do you change someone's mindset, but to educate them on the true value proposition of diversity? There's data, there's lots of data that says business results are better. we're in the world of cloud computing and data analytics, so that makes it an exciting application. So using data analytics to the HR world for how do you hire and how do you retain to create an inclusive environment. But it really is, it is a mindset shift, and that's, we were talking earlier, but I think that's why when the gentleman at Google wrote the letter saying that the reason the tech industry doesn't have more women is because of genetic deficiencies in women, and it's just a fact. That's his belief. I mean, he believes that. He wouldn't have said it if he doesn't believe it. And so, firing him isn't going to change his mindset. In fact, he just becomes emboldened and talks to white supremacists and gets wrapped up in it. So you have to work to change his mindset through education. That's
great example. Sticking with that same theme, when we think about like one of the things I've noticed here in the last 10 years is just, and it's occurring in education more generally, is what I would call the allyship movement, right? For groups that are in the majority, whatever sort of reference identity group we're talking about, right? And sort of, are you in? Are you demonstrably in? And so maybe you could talk a little bit about allyship and the men that are in at Intel. Let me just share one quick example. When we launched this Center for Gender Equity and Leadership, just as Kelly was mentioning, just in the last week, one of the speakers, Brandon Dahl, who's I think he's director of strategic initiatives at the Raiders, and he told this story, wonderful story. He said, when I was hired, he had taken Kelly's class and some other things here, but when he was hired, one of the things he said to his boss very early on, and he was telling the story when he was here, is, he told his boss, I'm a feminist. And his boss kind of chuckled, and he said, no, really. And so talked about what he meant by that, right? And that phrase of sort of demonstrably being able to say, you've got to back it up in deed as well. But there is something about having senior men say, I'm on board for this, and I'm telling everybody that.
Absolutely.
And are you seeing that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I completely agree with you. So if you just take the tech industry, but I think this applies to basically every industry. Men tend to have a stronger position, both at the leadership positions and in the masses. So it's not just a tech issue. But I completely agree with you that if in the tech industry, 23% of the industry is women and the rest are men, we can preach to ourselves the 23% all day long and nothing's going to change. So you can't ask the marginalized employees to fix the marginalization of the employees, right? It's illogical. So you've got to get the 77% of the men on board, and that change management starts with management change. So you have to have managers that don't just communicate, as you just said, they don't just communicate that I believe in diversity and I believe in creating an inclusive environment, but they actually change their behavior to demonstrate it. It has to be demonstrated because everyone in the organization is looking up. They all hear the diversity organization or the HR organization making the pitch on how we want to be a more diverse company, we want to be a more inclusive environment, and that's great, but everybody's looking up through their management chain and saying, okay, where's the action? And so change management starts with management change. Those managers have to demonstrate visible change. Their actions have to reflect that. And then you'll get the organization moving. So I consistent with what you just said, you have to tackle the majority population if you want to make real change.
Thank you. And then as we think about our students, we've got a lot of undergrads and, of course, MBAs in the room and some PhDs too. If you thought about them early on in their careers, how does a person sort of help a large organization become more inclusive if they're very early on in their career?
Well, I think number one, I think is everyone should ask themselves, do they believe, right? Do you personally believe in the value of diversity? And if you don't, invest in, like you're all students, right? Anytime we don't understand or don't believe something, you have the curiosity to invest in understanding what is the value proposition and educate yourself. So that's step one. And I think every generation becomes more progressive in this regard. I mean, I've been like I said, here at Intel for 32 years, and the tech industry in the 80s was much different than the tech industry is now, for the better. And every generation it gets better. But I think step one is test yourself. Do you truly believe, and can you articulate the value of diversity? And then if you are an advocate for diversity and an environment of inclusion, then be an advocate for the minority population within your company or within your environment. Advocate for them, because as the minority, it's often hard to advocate for yourself. You stick your neck out and you don't know what might happen. So having those peers around you willing to advocate on your behalf is incredibly powerful, and so appreciated if you've ever been on the other side.
And some of these can be relatively small acts. Like we haven't heard from
Absolutely
Carol
small
yet
acts.
in this conversation. We haven't heard from Carol.
Exactly.
Right?
Small acts go a very long way.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean that is a great one, right? You're sitting in the room and if a minority voices an opinion and you don't think it's been heard, ask them to reiterate, or gee, did we miss that? Or there's lots of small things you can do to pull people in and create an inclusive environment.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And jumping back to the industry, when you think about just some of the transformations that you have seen, when you think about mobile, or you think about digital and wearables, and you were early on in the PC revolution. Can you talk a little bit about those turning points and kind of how you think about forecasting them as best you can and staying in front of them?
Yeah, I think that's when I said earlier why I got into engineering and technology was for the money. Why I'm still here, clearly not for the money, if you know what Intel pays, right? But so why I'm still here is that pace. I just love the pace of innovation. It is really exciting. And so to your point, there have been big disruptions in the tech industry over my career at Intel. And if I can just quickly, in 1988, Andy Grove was our CEO. Andy Grove was quite a famous man. Unfortunately, he passed a couple years ago. But he said, okay, in the course of 2 weeks, I had Zenith, which I'm sure none of you guys know who that is, and Compaq, who was later acquired by HP. Two companies, big PC companies, desktop PC companies, come to me in the course of 2 weeks saying that they think people want to carry their computer around. And he said, I think that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Why would anybody want to carry around a desktop computer, right? Sounds stupid. And he says, but I'll take 20 engineers and you guys go off and you guys see if there's any way we can get a desktop computer down to something portable. And I happen to be chosen as one of the 20 years. Again, one of these that does not sound like a good, sounds like
project.
A risky project, right? When your CEO says, I don't believe in it, but go do it anyway. You're like, oh, wow, that doesn't sound good. But it's like, grab that opportunity, right? It sounds risky, but grab it. So the 20 of us original engineers, had to figure out, we were told that it had to weigh less than a sack of potatoes, which is 10 pounds. So it had to be less than 10 pounds, and it had to last on a battery for at least 1 hour. That was our goal. And we were like, holy cow, this is never going to work. Never going to work. And so we invented, your notebook today goes into sleep and suspend and resume and hibernate. We had to invent all those things to put your computer into lower and lower power. And anyway, it was very complicated. That's how I got my patents. So look at the mobile market, right? So I got to see that and participate in it. And now the big one that is so exciting is the move to cloud computing. And that, really in 2011 is when the buzz around the cloud came onto the scene. And then in 2012, I was moved into this job running the data center business, which is all about cloud computing today. But at the time, 2013, there was a study done of 1,000 Americans. This is 2013, just not even 4 years ago. 1,000 Americans were asked, and 51% of them said they believed that the weather could interfere with cloud computing. 51%. So you think of how far we have come in less than 4 years. Now cloud computing is like, you don't even think about it. But that transformation, that disruption was huge, because the old way of delivering compute was, the IT guy in the business acquires a server, networks it up, adds some storage at the end of the row, and delivers compute to their company. And there were many enterprise companies serving them. SAP, Oracle, HP, Dell, IBM, Microsoft, right? And then all of a sudden, cloud computing comes along, and it just disrupts that entire supply chain. And it was like with every disruption, it's either a threat or an opportunity. And again, back to seize the opportunity. I seized it to a lot of pressure. Our direct customers were mad at me.
Yeah.
The Wall Street was mad at me.
Really?
Yeah,
Because many liked the old way. It was simpler in some ways.
They liked the old way. Change is hard. The investor community said cloud computing is all about efficiency, more efficient deployment of compute.
Yeah.
And if something's more efficient, you're going to sell less of it, Diane. So your volumes are not going to grow. Your business is going to decline. And by the way, it's a big consolidated market of Amazon, Google, and Facebook and Microsoft. So now you're going to get price pressure. So it was and then internal, you have employees that have been calling on the enterprise customers forever. I don't know the cloud customers. So internal, external customers, Wall Street.
Everything realigned.
Everyone was, the pressure was intense. And and so this is the, if there's a disruption, see it as an opportunity. Don't see it as a threat. If it delivers compelling value.
Yeah.
If it delivers compelling value, you're fighting gravity to ignore it. And you can see enterprise companies that made that move and today are very successful, like Microsoft went from being an OS company to a cloud service provider, and then companies that couldn't make that move and are still struggling.
Yeah.
I won't name those. So, but my big, our tagline inside of my group is Jevon's paradox. I completely believe in Jevon's paradox. Anybody know who William Jevon is? So William Jevon, oh, you do? Yeah? Look at, I love him. Come to Intel.
That's right. Come
Look
to
at
Intel.
that. Come to Intel. Yes, well said. So William Jevon, 1865, in talking about the coal-fueled factories back in the industrial era, he said that if you make a resource, at that point he was talking about coal, but if you make a resource more efficient, the demand for that resource does not decline. The demand for it actually increases because you have now hit a new threshold. There's all new usages that couldn't use it before that now have the opportunity to use it. So demand for that resource will increase, not decrease, if you make it more efficient. So this was my pitch to Wall Street. Cloud computing is a more efficient way to deliver computing. You wait, demand will increase, not decrease.
Nice.
And compute demand has predictably grown 50% year over year over year. 50%.
Wow. And
So,
could we go back to 2011 and
That was a
2012?
long
No, that was a
answer, wasn't
perfect.
it?
I'm
Yeah.
going to ask another because I want to continue on this line.
Yeah.
Would you say that in 2011 and 2012, it was pretty clear that it was going to happen? I mean, we know that it did happen, but part of it, some people had to be saying, "Come on, this is not going to work that way. This is not," or was it pretty obvious?
You never know what's going on in someone's head versus what's coming out of their mouth, right? So there were a lot of people saying, are you kidding me? Enterprise IT is never going to run their apps on Amazon. Are you kidding? There's no way. Security, this, that, And so whether that's what they were saying in order to preserve their stock price to Wall Street, and inside they're thinking, holy cow, this is coming, I don't know. I think some really did believe that they could maintain their enterprise business despite the move to cloud. And so data, more and more data came. I mean, there was one CEO of a very large enterprise company that back in 2012 stood up on stage in front of 2 million people and said that cloud computing was nothing like a fad. Oh, it's like, pink versus red. It went on, it was the strangest thing I've ever heard. But anyway, he said it's just a fad like fashion. Like, this is just another fad. And then, you fast forward and they've had to move to the cloud. So it is interesting. But there was a lot of, it goes back to Jevon's paradox. I just have learned my lesson that if something is compelling and it's going to be inevitable and you got to jump on board and grab it.
That is a wonderful story. Thank you for that. And let's start on I'll just ask one more question that's very student-facing, and then students or anybody in the audience, if you have a question. When you think about hiring employees, at sort of this career stage, are there certain things that Intel just really needs to see?
Well, when I'm interviewing and hiring, certainly the things that I look for, and I think it's probably common with other companies, is you look for passion. When you're interviewing someone, you want to see that they really are passionate about their career and about the work and about the industry they've selected. That it's not just a job, right?
Yeah.
You're not just here to get a paycheck. You're really excited about it. The other is certainly confidence, right? Confidence that I can come in and contribute and have an impact. That's obviously very important. And also just the willingness to be a risk taker, to forge down paths without without complete clarity, to forge down those paths and be willing to take risks. So, and I think you can draw that out through the interview pretty readily.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Just one phrase you said earlier a lot of phrases you said earlier I love. One really caught me, and that was, I love the pace. Mm-hmm. And I realized what industry experience I've had. It was in the finance industry, but that was part of what thrilled me. It was just like the clock speed on this is just exciting. Yeah. And I'm not. Everybody doesn't respond in the same way to pace, but
no, that's true.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, are you really passionate about the job you're applying for?
Yeah.
Because not all jobs are for everyone.
No,
not all industries are for
not
everyone.
at all.
And it is, you have to be comfortable with change. I mean, I fear standing still. Like I enjoy change. I fear standing still.
Yeah.
But a lot of people like an environment that's far more comfortable and consistent. So you have to be thoughtful as to what company, what career, what industry you're going into to make sure there's a match. And the tech industry is so fast-paced. It's crazy.
And it
And
will be
fun.
more so. Questions? Who wants to jump up to the microphone? Please do use the microphone. We're capturing this for our video. You'll have to loop around. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Benjamin, and I'm actually a transfer student as well. So it's great to hear that somebody like yourself has reached such an amazing place. So my question is about management.
Yeah.
So I believe one thing I took away from Andy Grove's book, High Output Management, was that he really focused on efficiency with management. And in 2017, I really wonder, in your opinion, what degree of emotional connection do you feel a manager and an employee should have to be efficient in their relationship?
Well, so that's an interesting question, because I actually think emotional intelligence, social intelligence, EQ, is incredibly important in a manager and in a leader. All of you are incredibly bright. There's 1,000 companies you could go to, a zillion places you could contribute to. Your job, my job as a manager or leader, is to make you feel like this is the place where you could have the greatest success. This is the place where we as a team, as an organization, as a company are going to succeed. And so I need to be able to connect with you, not just at a task list level. I need to be able to connect with you emotionally. And I think that's a huge fundamental requirement of a leader is, when you talk about leadership style, I tend to be very inclusive. Then in driving a direction or a strategy or a decision, then very decisive in making that decision, because ambiguity can just kill an organization. And then once that decision is made, my biggest job is convincing you, not the masses, but you as a valued employee, that decision is good for you, that you're going to be successful, that here's how you can contribute. I have to make that connection, or you'll wake up and say, well, that was the dumbest decision I ever heard. I'm out of here. Right? And now I've lost. Now my ability to actually deliver against that decision is lost. So emotional connection to your staff, your team, your organization, your company as a leader is incredibly important. And I think it differentiates good leaders than bad leaders. I think it differentiates the guy that is the first line manager to making it to the second level to making it to VP.
Yeah, super question.
Yeah, it is a smart question.
Super answer. Thank you very much. Please.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm really glad you spoke about risk. I'm trying to become more of a risk taker, and I know that's something that you value in employees and in your team. How would you suggest that we can embrace that risk more? Everybody has kind of their inherent level of comfort with it, but what can we do to increase our level of comfort?
So I get this a lot that's a great question, because I get a lot at Intel where employees will say, you say we're risk takers, it's on the back of our badge, but you wouldn't fund my great idea.
Yeah.
And And you're like, you have to explain, like, why not? And so what's important when you decide whether or not to take that risk and make that jump is that you do an ROI assessment, right? Because there's a lot of big risks we could take as an organization, and there's got to be a return on that risk. And the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward better be. They've got to be commiserate, right? I'm willing to take a small risk for a small reward. I'm not willing to take a big risk for a small reward. It's just a bad use of Intel's money and capacity. So as the employee looking to take that risk, you should stand back and say, how big of a risk is it? If it goes haywire, how bad could it get? But if it is successful, how big is the benefit and the result and the outcome? And it's got to be proportional. And so as an employee, thinking through what's the downside, what's the upside, big risk, big reward, all in. Big risk, small reward, not such a good business idea, or not such a good employee decision either, because your career is valuable. So that's what I tell people.
Super. Thank you. Please.
Hi, Diane. Thanks so much for being here. My name's Claire. So I found in my last job that if I would ever pitch an idea in a meeting and it was a bad idea, I think there's a 9 out of 10 chance that it was actually just a bad idea, but I would have this 1 in 10 chance in my mind that's is it because I'm a woman that it's not getting the same attention that someone else's idea may have gotten? And sometimes, mostly I try to put that thought out of my mind, but sometimes it gets me and it just really depresses me. Have you had that thought before, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, almost every day, yeah. Yeah, I think all of us are filled with some kind of level of self-doubt. You don't have to be in the minority situation. You pitch an idea, you think it's great, and the response is hard. It's hard on you. It's hard not to go home and think, oh my gosh, was that stupid? Was it? Or then start to think of all the other reasons it could have gone wrong. I think one of the keys to success is the willingness to ask for feedback and being open and receptive to that feedback. And I say that slowly because it's very hard for me. I don't really like to hear the negative feedback. I'm glad someone else is nodding. It's hard to have someone tell you, here's all the things that are wrong with you. Yeah, so that's very hard. But if you don't do that, you won't ever know, and you may be ruminating over something that just doesn't exist, and it may be something completely different that you didn't realize. Maybe that idea was pitched last week in a meeting, and it was already decided that there wasn't funding for that. Well, you weren't in that meeting, you didn't know, right? But it's so easy to get inside of our heads, and so if find someone in the room that you trust and pull them aside and say, hey, could I just get some feedback? I thought that was a darn good idea. What do you think happened? Otherwise, you're right. We drive ourselves crazy with wondering. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
We'll bounce to this side and then over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much. I have a ton of questions, but I'm just gonna ask you one because of time constraints. But I'm pursuing a dual degree in engineering and Haas right now, business right now.
Yeah.
And the more I learn about the industry, I realize that what I'm learning in engineering right now would be primitive compared to what I'm going to be pursuing in 10 or 20 years. And even what I'm going to learn about business here would be primitive to the industry I will tackle in 10 or 20 years, because technology industry, like you described, is very fast-paced. So what is your greatest advice for students right now who are willing to be part of the technology industry? And we do realize that we have to be adjusted to the fast pace, but what kind of strategies could we use, or what kind of mindsets could we be ready to face that rapid pace as we get into the industry?
Yeah, so number one, I want to say I think it's super smart for you to be getting an undergrad engineering degree coupled with an MBA. I think that's an incredibly powerful combination in today's world of technology, because if you go back in time, even before I graduated, that's how far back we're going. So if you go that far back in time, technology really was about technology invention. Someone invented the transistor. Wow, that's how Intel got started. Someone invented the very fundamentals of technology were being invented, and those were PhDs in material science and PhDs in. Now you fast forward, and those fundamental building blocks exist. Now it's about applied technology, right? How do you take those fundamental building blocks and apply it? And that, not that invention doesn't continue, I don't want to minimize, but I mean, we've got huge building blocks, technology building blocks to now apply. So if you look at how does any any invention becomes successful, it takes three things, right? It takes one, what is the invention, right? What did you just invent? And that is a technology engineering role, right, generally. Then it takes market sensing. What does the market need, right? Where is their demand? Where is their opportunity? How can I fulfill an unmet demand? Where is the market going? Where's the business market going? Where's the consumer market going? So market sensing, and we actually have PhDs in market philosophy that help with that market sensing, very much of a business mindset of what's going on. And then the third is the business opportunity. What's the business model? Can I make money off of it? Can it be profitable? I have a great idea. I think it serves an unmet demand in the market. But geez, if I can't make any money off of it, it's not going to go far with the VC community or any investing community. That's very much a business and MBA skill set and requirement. So being both a technologist with an MBA, it's a perfect combination for finding that next idea, that next invention. So it's very smart to do that. The other is, I believe, and I'm not, you can correct me, actually you should, but I do believe that what you learn in school is how to learn. I mean, you learn fundamentals, but then you're learning how to learn. And so I certainly, maybe it's too obvious, but I certainly wouldn't worry about the pace because you're learning the latest technology today, but more importantly, you're learning how to learn, and you're going to come into the industry, and that cycle will just continue.
Thank you so much.
If I could just clarify, you're an MET student?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So we just launched a brand new dual degree undergrad program. They will leave this program with a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Bachelor of Science in Business. So we are coding both fields in these undergraduates' minds at the same time, and it's a wonderful new program.
When do you take enrollment? Can I
As
enroll?
freshmen. Yeah.
Wow,
Yes,
that's smart.
yes, you
That's
can.
a great idea.
Well, he's a member of the
Congratulations.
first class, and there are 40 of them. Anyways, we'll be
lovely.
sending many of them to Intel, we
That's
hope. So,
lovely.
anyway,
Good for you,
thank you
because
for
that is an incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you for that
Thank you so
question.
much.
Please, over here. And then I think this one over here will have to be the last question. So we'll go here and then over here, please.
Yeah, hi. Thanks
Hi.
for your time. I'm Brian, and I just wanted to ask you about how you mentioned in 2011 betting on the cloud was a big risk. I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on what risks are happening with Intel today and the competitors, because it seems like NVIDIA is betting a lot on machine learning and GPUs and everything.
Yeah, so a huge investment that Intel is making today is in artificial intelligence. So, artificial intelligence is kind of the umbrella term for machine learning, deep learning is a subset of that, but data analytics, right? Intel's making a huge bet. My organization made a $400 million acquisition in Nirvana, which is a deep learning ASIC and software solution. It is the future. I think artificial intelligence is absolutely going to transform society, just like the Industrial Revolution transformed society way back when. I don't know if you know Andrew Ng, but he was one of the early data scientists at Baidu, and I love what he said, which is the Industrial Revolution eliminated physical drudgery. AI revolution will eliminate mental drudgery. It is literally going to transform every single industry. And it's, why is AI possible, right? The field of AI was founded back in 1956 and then became kind of the sci-fi word of the day. The reason it wasn't making progress is in order to get a machine, a computing machine, to have a level of intelligence and to predict actions and to continuously learn, you need massive amounts of data and massive amounts of compute power. So it just wasn't feasible. Yeah. You fast forward now, and really in 2014 was when the field of AI took off, a lot of it coming from MIT and Stanford. And the reason it's possible, we will pat ourselves on the back and take credit for Moore's Law. The fact that Moore's Law, the economic law by Gordon Moore, our founder, co-founder, that every 2 years the capacity of compute will double. And with that then, the cost of compute comes down to where now AI is actually feasible. You couldn't afford to capture all the data, compute on the data, and store all the data required for autonomous driving 10 years ago. It's impossible. Now finally it's possible. And that's why you see AI, something that was founded back in 1956, fast forward to 2014, and it's happening. And it's very, very, very disruptive. We go back to the conversation on disruption. It's very disruptive, and Intel will say we are best positioned to do it. there's always going to be competitors. When you have Google develop their own ASIC around TensorFlow, NVIDIA saying, oh, look, I have a graphics controller. It does matrix multiply. Oh, look, that's what neural networks need is matrix multiply. Look, I've got a solution. It was like, you got lucky, Jensen. That's good, it applies. but so everybody is investing, and why wouldn't you? It's a big disruptive force. Jump on and grab it, or you get left behind. And you can look at, it will disrupt markets. Look at Uber disrupting the taxi industry. It will disrupt products. Autonomous driving, that's a cloud service, a connected cloud service onto a car. Who's going to win that? Is that the automotive industry is going to figure out how to be a cloud service provider, or the cloud service providers going to figure out how to build cars? Talk about disruption coming, right? And it will, it'll disrupt all supply chains. Look at Amazon disrupting the retail industry. The supply chain is completely disrupted. The advanced forwarding of material out to the edge, product out to the edge through AI allows Amazon to get you whatever you need. 1-day turnaround. That's all AI. So it is extremely disruptive, and it's very exciting. I think it'll change the way all businesses operate. It'll change the way we engage with the world. I think it's incredibly exciting, and Intel is all in, game on.
Oh, it's a wonderful example. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about it was a different technology. But people say, oh, there's so much kind of froth and seeming hype around it, right? But then the point was made, in 1999, when many people were hyping the web, much of what we saw around that time disappeared in the next year or two. But fast forward to 2017, and you have Google and you have Amazon, and the kernel of that transformation was understood in the late 90s, even though it took a totally different form in the end than what anybody was guessing in the late 90s. The point was, this is going to transform. We don't quite know exactly how yet.
And I think that's the point, because there's a lot of concern. You see, are we out of time?
Yeah, we'll have one more. We have one.
You see a lot in the press now of the noise around the negativity around AI, like Elon Musk, saying that it's going to create World War III. Right. Stephen Hawking saying, if we don't get a control on AI, it's going to end human civilization. It's all this concern and hype, and it's fear of the unknown. But if you look back in time, you say every time we go through these massive transformations, some jobs do go away. There are changes in the way we operate, but new opportunities and new jobs emerge. Look what the internet has brought us. To your point, look what the internet has brought us. And back then, right, everybody was worried. Going digital.
And some things will go by the board. Last question, please, ma'am.
So, as a woman in a high leadership position, what was a challenge that you faced, and how did you overcome it?
How many hours do we have? No, I think the biggest, as a woman in tech, I think the biggest challenge is always when you're faced with a difficult, challenging environment, whether it's your boss or your peers or whatever. What do you do about it? And do you just hunker down? Do you raise a red flag? Do you leave? And I'm not the role model for the answer to that question, because I was always in the grit. I will succeed. I'll hunker down. I'll get through this. I'll manage through it. Fortunately, you fast forward, and I think there's a lot broader recognition industry-wide. Things like Weinstein and others have helped illuminate the situation and made it easier to talk about than it was back in, when I was a younger engineer in the world. And so I would say, raise your hand, report it. Let's try to make the environment a better place for everyone, for sure. Easier said than I know sometimes done, but.
Well, so many elements, Diane, of what you shared with us today will stick with us. I've made a few notes, and one of the phrases, figure out how to make the most of it, right? I mean that links to grit so wonderfully, but it's a great management philosophy, right? I mean, failures don't need to be abject failures, right? It didn't work out as well as we wanted to, but we drove it to as good a place as we could. Diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a decision. That's a very powerful concept. And one that spoke to me, I don't know, I've already mentioned it, but love the pace. I love the pace, and this industry has a remarkable pace, and there's so much excitement in it. Thank you, Diane. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.